What is going on, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Daily Energy Newsbeat Stand-Up here on this gorgeous Tuesday, February 7th, 2023. As always, I'm your humble correspondent, Michael Tanner, coming to you from an undisclosed location, fresh off assignment from Napa Valley. I smell of grapes and the finer things in life. I appreciate the little vacation. I apologize that you were stuck with Stu, and I'd like to welcome back all of the listeners who have abandoned us since my last show on Thursday. As you mentioned, guys, I'm joined by the executive producer of the show, the purveyor of the show, the director and publisher of the world's greatest website, EnergyNewsbeat.com, Stuart Turley. I am just kidding, Stu. How you doing today?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. And by the way, I am glad we're on Zoom. We are going to live here before too long, and you would smell like a wino. So I am so glad I'm not having to hang with you. I was really afraid, Michael, I was going to have to do like the, what was it? The Hangover. And I was going to have to come pull you out after seeing Mike Tyson's Tiger. So I'm glad I didn't have to go do that.
Yeah, no, I was able to, I made it out alive. I was able to stuff myself into an airplane about 1 o'clock yesterday.
Bailing you out of jail is a habit that I just soon not get into.
Well, guys, with that, we have an excellent show lined up. There's a lot happened. Stu covered a tremendous amount while I was gone, so I do appreciate that. And so if I go back and maybe pick some stories from the back, I will do that. But for today's show, we've got a couple lined up. First, U.S. authorities enforce evacuations after train derails in Ohio, starting off the new week. Right. Holy smokes. That's horrible. Next article we've got is everybody loves oil again, followed by Russian fiscal budget shows 35% decline for January. Oh, that's interesting. Stu, sanctions may do work. We'll see what that's all about. Wind power makers suffer huge losses, want to abandon a major project in a move that nobody saw coming. Just kidding. And then finally, neo-Nazi couple arrested for alleged plot to, quote, completely destroy the Baltimore energy grid. This is pretty insane, so I'm going to let Stu cover that. And the final story we have is Timeline, the world's deadliest earthquake since 2020, 2000. As you guys might have known, there was a magnitude 7.8 earthquake that shook Turkey and Syria today. And right now, the death toll is at about 1,000 people, but I think Stu's going to tell us it's probably going to continue to climb harder. What does that mean for energy prices and abroad? Stu will cover that. He will then kick it over to me. We'll cover what happened to the crude oil markets today. We did see a little bit of a bounce, currently trading about 74.70. Natural gas, a little bit of hope. We're at $2.49, but the stock market did have a good day. There's a couple interesting finance things. First, the latest and the newest IPO for an oil and gas company, TXO Energy Partners, which is actually a master limited partnership. They announced the closing of an oversubscribed IPO, so we'll cover what that means. ConocoPhillips dropped their fourth quarter 2022 results, are returning $11 billion of capital, declares quarterly dividend, and announce share buyback program along with Shell. So I think we're seeing a theme here among some of the major oil companies, share buybacks. We'll cover all that and a bag of chips, guys. But first, check us out on the world's greatest website, www.energynewsbeat.com, dashboard.energynewsbeat.com, the best place for all of your data and news combined into one platform. We are hard at work at V2, and we're looking forward to coming out with those updates very soon. But enough of the pleasantries, Stu. Where would you like to begin?
Well, hey, let's start with a couple of tragedies here. The U.S. authorities enforce evacuations over train derails in Ohio. Michael, this is absolutely catastrophic. 500 50 train cars derailed on Friday night in East Palestine, Ohio. Here's part of the problem with that, Michael, is the fact that 20 of those 50 are hazmat designated. What that means is there are downstream chemicals in those things, and it's horrific. The reason that we need to be praying for the folks, but it's also I'm only really bringing this up for people's attention for the fact that New York City has the highest natural gas prices right now over the weekend, and it's because they have to bring in their natural gas via LNG through the Boston import regasification off of the international. How that's applicable is pipelines save disasters. Let's get all this kind of crap off of rail and put them in pipelines, which is safer. So with that, our thoughts and prayers go out to all of the folks out in Ohio. And let's go to the next story.
Well, I mean, I just want to say, first of all, it's a miracle nobody was injured or killed in this derailment. Not even anybody who was living around, but also the crew working on that rail.
Hats off.
You're exactly
to the team.
right. This is the reason why pipelines are safer, because if there is a quote unquote disaster in a pipeline, it's just a leak. And I don't want to compare a leak. I don't want to start comparing oil leaks to other things, but in this scenario, I would much rather an oil leak, and that's much easily detectable, than a massive derailment, to the fact where, if you read lower in the article, Stu, they had to turn the school into a shelter. I'm going to take the option that doesn't turn the school into the shelter. Whatever that option is, I go with that.
Let's take ESG real quick. We'll derail here for a second. Good pun. But here's the thing. Carbon capture and carbon detection. I'm on a roll tonight, Michael.
So good. You've gotten two great ones today.
And so when you sit back and think, carbon capture, carbon detection, methane detection is all coming through satellite now.
Yep.
It was put out there that the Biden regulations is good in detecting these things. Leaks are detectable and can be shut down before it's a disaster. So thanks for letting me derail that. Okay, coming around the corner here, Everybody Loves Oil again. It's almost like that show, Everybody Loves Raymond. I used to really love that show. Reopening of the Chinese economy. Michael, you and I have been talking about this for a long time, can really help the world avoid a recession. And then the bulk of the purchase in crude oil futures.
There's a lot of crude or bullish crude buying based upon this Chinese demand sentiment, which is fascinating. Right.
It is. And when you drop down lower in the article, 25 basis point is likely baked into the current oil future prices. So the market will be looking out for Fed comments. So it's integrated into.
Which is dumb. So it's because we're going beyond 25 basis points. We're probably going to be 75. We may even be a full point. So yeah, watch out.
Buckle up and hold on to your bahunkuses. All right, we're going to go to the next one here, Michael. Russian fiscal budget shows 35% decline for January. Let me explain this. And as everybody knows, I've been very bullish on my comments that sanctions don't work. And let's go through some of the numbers here. Sanctions don't work. However, when you take a look at this article, the pricing metrics, they actually produced 2% more, but what happened was the slide between the Brent price and what they were selling outside of the Brent price to contracts outside. So it really was not a revenue issue on sanctions. It really is a distinction of how the new currency is going to be pulling off of the dollar. So if you read that, really, sanctions didn't work. Russia still has a lot of money, and it's because the oil price was cut in half compared to where it was the previous budget cycle. Make sense?
You're absolutely right. The headline makes it easy to make fun of you, but when you actually read the meat and potatoes, you're right. It's a lot to do with just the decline in oil prices versus the sanctions are working. It's just fun to tease you because I like doing it. So
we just put out a story. We just put a story out a few minutes ago that Russia and Iran are actually binding together. Okay, Iran is the one that learned and taught Russia how to avoid sanctions. Russia said, hey, I'm Putin. I'm going to go ahead and do one better. I'm going to, there's my, what is it? My bad Putin imitation. So now you have the two world's sanction avoiding countries working together. Holy smokes. We're going to see sanction avoidance like you wouldn't believe. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay. This, Michael, since you were out traveling around the world, avoiding being hangover material or arrested, however you wanted to say this, wind power was absolutely a nutty story that broke loose. Irina Slav, we love Irina Slav. She broke another story that we'll talk about here in a sec. This article says, wind power makers suffer huge losses and won an abandoned major project. This article is stuffed with a bunch of other stuff that we had talked about as well. Bernard Looney said last week that he was now no longer investing heavily in renewables because they were no longer profitable. Try this one on. The greenies dream of clean, except for millions of dead birds and whales. We ran that story, which went bonkers about the dead whales in New England because of the wind farms. Poor economies, tax subsidies, the big players in constructing wind turbines are facing massive losses. Siemens out of Germany lost a billion last quarter. What's a billion between friends and losses, Michael?
Yikes.
So
yeah.
Let's go through this one. Translation: further government action is increasing subsidies beyond those already offered in the misnamed Inflation Reduction Act. So people are now saying wind farms are not profitable. We need more tax money. So we need more tax money so that we can print money and then make more inflation happen so that the Fed can raise the rates and ruin the economy more. This is a never-ending squirrel that's about to happen. So
I'd love to sick Sandy on that squirrel. I mean, that Sandy, you got to get on that squirrel problem.
It's a huge squirrel. And the rest of this article is really critical when you sit back and take a look at it's beyond the time to end subsidies for wind power. Not only is the atmospheric CO2 risen without serious consequences, it's the doomsaying models proven consistently wrong. But the financial thumb on the scale via subsidies has encouraged development of a technology that's still immature. This is following along two other things. The only way to really scale wind energy is to go higher. We are now finding that those huge wind turbines are falling over, much like a politician after a discovery that he's been cheating. He falls over and then he bounces up. Well, guess what? This is a really bad bounce. These things are falling off, and wind turbines are only lasting 8 years instead of the 30 everybody promises. So stay tuned, dude.
Yeah, okay. I think this to sum this article up best, we do it the way Erno Slav did to finish. With wind power, Kenny Rogers' song provides wise advice. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, and know when it's time to walk away from wind power subsidies.
I love Irina. Absolutely a class act. That woman is classy. This next one, Michael, is really not about neo-Nazis. And if you saw the pictures in here, I swear, for our podcast listeners, go look at the article. It is neo-Nazi couple arrested for alleged plot to completely destroy Baltimore's energy grid at risk. Here's the thing, Michael, look at that picture of that dude. Doesn't he look like, who was the actor? Charlie Sheen. Doesn't he look like a young Charlie Sheen? I mean, tell me that wouldn't, he looks like his cousin or.
I don't know if I get Charlie Sheen vibes. I definitely get neo-Nazi vibes. So
okay,
this makes total sense. The crazy part is it'll be interesting to see how far and what their plan entailed, because we talk at length and at nauseum on this show about the one little slip up and one little neo-Nazi getting through and throwing a grenade can completely cause a chain reaction that could go crazy. So I hope we're taking this as a warning that we need to beef up our security.
Now, everybody, Michael, while you were out in California having a glass of wine or two or three, the balloon was going bonkers. Yeah, you had four. And the balloon going across the
Chinese balloon. I just saw bits and pieces of that floating around the internet. I wasn't too tapped in.
Oh, it was absolutely a hoot. Now, when you sit back and take a look, the knuckleheads around the world, around the left wing, I got trolled all the time on Twitter. I thoroughly enjoyed my weekend throwing things out there and people, trolls trying to come back and get me. I'm like, bring it on, guys. They were all saying, a balloon goes across the United States and it wasn't shot down until after President Biden checked with the Chinese to make sure it was okay now that it was on the East Coast. Okay, that is just horrible. Now, why would they not shoot it down in Montana or Alaska? My dad 50 years ago was scrambled. Tomcat was scrambled to shoot them things down in the past. He and I were talking about that. This is the dumbest thing on the planet. And everybody's saying, well, why are we worried about it? Because satellites. Wrong. The technology is there so that the new cameras that come in on that thing can get within an inch. Why is that important? Because let's say the energy and the grid that this story is bringing up, once you find out where the radio transmissions are, you find the frequencies, you find all of the things, that thing's picking up communications. It's not picking up phone calls from President Biden when he's calling me to go, hey, what should I do about the energy? I'm like, get somebody else in there as energy secretary. This is huge. China put on their wind platform radios on right outside an Air Force base and had all that sitting on that wind farm going in there. That balloon was critical information. Then it came out and said that, Trump let 3 of them go by. Guess what? Trump didn't know about it, and it came out that they hid it from him. He would have shot them down. So you have a bunch of lying rat commie folks that are like running this whole thing into the ground and saying it's not a big deal. Bull hockey. It's a big deal. All right. I'm all done.
We have to take a deep breath after that. We have to. Did that feel good? Did that feel good?
I do feel good.
I bet that felt good. It feels good to rant. That was
all
good.
Right. And
that was good.
That's all I got to say.
That's all you've got for today. Well, we'll kick it over to finance. I've only got really a couple things. I think from an overall standpoint, the market was a little choppy. We saw 0.6 of a point get chopped off the S&P 500. We were down about 0.8 of a point on the Nasdaq. Crude oil slightly up 74.39 currently as we record this, about 6:45 on February 6th. I think mainly what we're the IEA came out and dropped a report today, as Stu mentioned, that really sees China as the driver for demand. Again, a lot of these crude oil people are only pricing in 25 basis points increase, which I think is fascinating considering I would probably peg it at 50 to 75 basis points. So I think that crude oil curve is possibly flatter, if not, or is too flat and it maybe need to be a little steeper. So it'll be fascinating to see how the strip plays out. On the natural gas side, guys, really we're just eyeing a storage report to give you an idea. The range of expectations is anywhere this Thursday from 145 BCF to 215 BCF. Last year we had a draw of about 228. So we're back in the possible the 100 to 200 BCF draws, which should help because we're trading at about $4.96 or $2.49. Excuse me. We're actually up about four full cents since we started recording this about 10 minutes ago. So that's really good to see. It's nice to see a green pop on gas. we were dealing with, I know everyone who's listening to the show yesterday, Haynesville was down less than $2 in terms of actual realized pricing. We saw everything up in Appalachia was down like 150. EQT's considering. I'm sure they're talking about specific regional shut-ins. It'll be very interesting to see how everything. But I know if you're sitting in a natural gas producer right now, you guys are having a lot of interesting decisions. Or if you were in the process or are in the process of buying a gas deal, holy smokes, has everything been thrown into chaos right now. So they don't call it the Widowmaker for nothing.
Wow.
I think I've got two quick stories. First, ConocoPhillips, they did report fourth quarter earnings. I think we should cover that. I'll kind of read you a couple of their IR highlights. So again, take all of these with a grain of salt. But they did generate cash provided by operating activities of $28.3 billion. Or what's known as cash flow from operations of $28.5 billion, and ended the year with $9.5 billion of cash and short-term investments. They distributed $15 billion through a three-tiered framework to shareholders, including $5.7 billion in cash through ordinary dividends and variable return of cash, and $9.3 billion through share repurchases, which was 50% of the cash flow from operations went back into share repurchases. Oh, interesting. More share buybacks from oil and gas. They didn't go out and make an IR statement. They didn't go out and they buried this in line 2, and they buried it within a sentence within a sentence. Who's the IR guy? Who's the IR guy? No. This is great. No. This is praise. Dennis News. Nah, it's not it. I don't know who it is. I think Dennis News. No, that's the contact guy. Whoever their IR guy is, honestly, it's smart. They're avoiding a lot of smoke. Think about it. Chevron comes out and does a press release that is saying, we're going to do share buybacks. They get flack on flack on flack on flack from the government. ConocoPhillips, ironically, is probably the second biggest oil producer in the country. I mean, you obviously, Chevron and Exxon are going to be number 1. They're sneakily number 3 after acquiring Concho. They've got a lot on the line here. What do? They take the opposite approach. They talk about distribution to shareholders and flip it into the last half of a sentence buried in the thing. Tells you something. That they pour these over. They didn't just come up with this press release yesterday. They, unlike some companies, they put thought into things that they do. So boom, right there.
Right. We
got buried. That's very interesting because we're about to have another story. Shell's got a whole new press release on dividends or on share buyback. So interesting. You've got Chevron and Shell on one hand, and you've got ConocoPhillips on the other. But I digress. They did expand their global LNG business. They developed a full year record production of 1.7 million BOE. 1,738,000 barrels. So yeah, it's like 170,000 barrels a day BOE, and record lower 48 production. They finally have finished integrating their lower 48 assets. Again, that was that Concho. What else did they do? Trying to blah, blah, blah. I mean, we could, there's so much in this press release, but I think the most interesting part, obviously, they blew out expectations. 176% preliminary reserve replacement ratio. That's insane. Adjusted earnings of $3 billion. Full earnings were $18.17 billion or $14 per share. Woo, 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 woo. A lot of money. But I think it's interesting in the contrast of the style. Concho seems to bury their share repurchase program within the second bullet point. Shell comes out with their own press release. We've got this. Shell announces commencement of share buyback program. I mean, it's only $4 billion, so it's not huge. It's not $75 billion like Chevron, but still, they choose to go their own press release, which I think is interesting because they're a European company. They're even in more of the crosshairs than the United States companies, yet they come out with a press release. Which is very interesting in the clash of styles. And what's interesting is you've seen, I wasn't here to cover it, but BP, Bernard Looney, looks like they're out. He finally saw some economics and was like, oh, wait, wind doesn't make any money. We should probably pivot elsewhere. So someone finally got that slide deck slipped into his email. And then second, you've got everybody trying to now pivot back into oil. It's hilarious how these oil majors just flowing. So you think Exxon's the only one and Chevron are the only ones that are steady. I like the fact Chevron came out and was basically like, yo, double middle finger, 75 billion share stock buy. I think it's cool, but it's a very interesting strategy wise about putting yourself in the crosshairs versus not.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, it's that whole paradigm shift is amazing. And ConocoPhillips is an interesting beat. Arjun Murtry is on their board, and I did a nice interview with him. He is a sharp cookie. They got some good peoples over there.
I'm a big fan of ConocoPhillips. I think their IR team is brilliant because this is avoiding unnecessary flack.
Right.
By just saying, yo, we're going to just put this in here. We're just going to put this in here versus where Shell's coming out, so that's the only thing I've got on this. I really like it. Glad for ConocoPhillips. We love to see anything with record production in it. So you'll never convince me record oil production is not great.
And I get to interview Nick DeGilius tomorrow. He's the CEO of CNX. They're a $2 billion market cap folks tomorrow.
They're a gas player out in Appalachia.
Mm-hmm.
He's flying. I heard he's flying economy tomorrow. Just kidding.
Oh, you're harsh, dude.
I am harsh.
They're a good company.
No, they're a great company. They're right up there. I think they're the second largest gas player up in Appalachia. So that is great. We'll look forward to the release of that. Stu, is there anything else you want these fine people to know about?
I just really appreciate all of our fans. Our shows are going off. The Crude Truth, the Energy Question, the Energy Transition, all of our shows that we produce at the Sandstone Media Group. We have another one blowing up. And Michael, I got a bet with you. I think within a couple months, our little Sandstone Media is probably going to be putting out 500,000 downloads a month. I guarantee you.
Yeah, I got to update the bots to keep pounding the downloads. So once I crank them up a little bit, we'll crank whatever. But again, we appreciate everybody.
We don't play no bots around here.
I know. We appreciate everybody who has tuned in and listened. And maybe we'll, in another world, we'd spend the next 20 minutes expounding on how great you guys are. But in this one, we're going to let you go and get out of here, get back to work. Again, we appreciate you checking us out. For Stuart Turley, I'm Michael Tanner. We'll see you tomorrow, guys.